G'day guys, Chaos Space Marines have a brand new detachment and I am so excited. Creations of Bile is something that I played a ton of in 9th edition. I'm super thrilled to see them return in 10th edition with a really strong detachment that rivals the power of the Veterans of the Long War and the Renegade Raiders. So in today's video, we're going to break this detachment down in detail, and then we're going to round the video out with 4 different lists that I've written that you can use to trial out the Creations of Bile detachment yourself. So with that being said, let's get stuck into it.
Look for the Blood God.
Blog for the Blood God exclusive high quality dice. Blog for the Blood God exclusive high quality dice. Blog for the Blood God exclusive high quality dice. Hi, I'm Dean Simbeck, President and CEO of Blog for the Blood God's exclusive high-quality dice warehouse and emporium. Due to a shipping error, I'm currently overstocked with Blog for the Blood God exclusive high-quality dice, and I'm passing the savings on to you! Roll 9-inch charges, pass invulnerable saves, roll high for damage, and score lots of hits. Check out the links in the description of this video to pick up your set today. Alright, before we pull up the rules and have a quick look at them, I just wanted to have a quick word on the Creations of Bile. Now, this has historically, in previous editions, been one of the most powerful ways to play the Chaos Space Marines, and it's also one of the most versatile, and you'll see that when we go through this detachment. So while it may not have the tricks that the other detachments have, it has so much raw power in the way that this enhances data sheets that I think this is going to be a strong contender for one of the best Chaos Space Marine detachments that we have available to us. So with that being said, and an open mind, let's have a look at the detachment that we've been given in the Grotmas for the Chaos Space Marines. Alrighty guys, here we have the Creations of Bile Chaos Space Marines detachment. So first thing we've got here is your standard detachment rule that everyone gets. And for the Creations of Bile, it's really interesting. So at the start of the battle, select which augmentations are active for Heretic Astartes models, excluding damned models, from your army until the end of the battle. To do so, either select one from the list below, or randomly determine them by rolling 2d6. If Fabius Bile is your warlord, then when randomly determining augmentations, you can re-roll one or both of the dice. Duplicated augmentations have no additional effect. So this is an army-wide buff, and you get to basically either select one or randomly generate two. And we'll go into how to make that decision in a moment. But first, let's have a look at the options available to us. The first one is clorinogenic accelerants. Add one to the attacks characteristic of melee weapons equipped by this model, right? Obviously, that's amazing. +1 attack army-wide. Brutal. Now, it's worth noting this is only on infantry, but a lot of the best Chaos Space Marine data sheets are infantry, so there's no problems there. But yeah, +1 to attack. Then you've got, I'm not going to bother trying to read the names because they're all ridiculous, but you've got add 2 to the movement characteristic of models. Again, really powerful on your melee-centric Chaos Space Marine models. You've got improve the weapon skill characteristic of melee weapons by 1. Now, mathematically, this is roughly the same as adding +1 attack, because if you increase the weapon skill, you're going to get roughly 1 additional hit, whereas if you get, +1 attack, that often translates into 1 additional hit. There are some cases where the +1 attack's better, there's some cases where the +1 to hit is better, so they're more or less comparable. Then you've got improve the toughness characteristic of the models in this unit by 1. Now this one is really crazy. It pushes your things up to really interesting breakpoints. You've got add 1 to the strength characteristic of melee weapons equipped by those models, which is also very good and can push you into some really interesting breakpoints as well. And then last, and unfortunately least, we have improved the ballistic skill characteristic of models by 1, which is, in my opinion, is the worst of the 6, depending on how you build your list. And we will go into some lists later in the video, where I break down some lists that are designed to take advantage of each one of these particular abilities. So as far as a detachment rule, I think this is one of the strongest ones they've got. Being able to just pick one of these and get it army-wide, if there's one that's going to be really powerful in a certain matchup, is fantastic, or being able to roll and potentially get 2 of these is also absolutely brutal. And the thing is because you don't have to have this on your list, you can choose it game by game. You can look at your opponent's list and be like, well, hang on, you've got mostly strength 4 weaponry. So if I pick the +1 toughness, all of a sudden all my toughness 4 Marines go to toughness 5, that's effectively a blanket -1 to be wounded. Or if they're mostly strength, say they're mostly toughness 5, you can go, okay, well, I'm going to put +1 strength on, and now my accursed weapons and my warp talons, etc., are going to be going to strength 6, which is essentially army-wide +1 to wound. These are absolutely brutal. Or if you're versing another combat army and you want to go, well, I want to make sure that my threat range is longer than yours, making it difficult for you to initiate charges, well, then I'm going to pick the +2 to move. Or if you're feeling greedy and you're not sure which one of these is best and you're struggling to make that decision, you can always put it to the fate of the dice. As long as you have Fabius Bile, you're likely to get at least one of the really good ones, and then an additional supplementary one, which is just going to make your list even stronger. So this is a fantastic detachment rule. I think that's 10 out of 10. That's premium. And then we get into the enhancements, and this is dripping with fantastic enhancements. So the first one we've got here is Surgical Precision, 10 points. Heretic Astartes model only, excluding Damned. And the Bearer's melee weapons gain precision. So that's going to save you command points. You don't need to use the heroic challenge to precision out your opponent characters. And also it's going to allow you to do that in 2 different places at once. You can have 2 combats going on. You can use the stratagem in one to precision out their characters, and then you can use your character over here to precision their characters. That's really, really cool. Living Carapace, this one's only 15 points, and it gives your Chaos Lord model only +1 wound and a 5-up Feel No Pain. That's really fantastic, and it's worth noting the Chaos Lord is a keyword here, so it does apply to Chaos Lords in Terminator armor. They have specified. Then we've got Helm of All Seeing, 25 points, Heretic Astartes infantry only, excluding Damned. And enemy units that are set up on the battlefield from reserves cannot be set up within 12 inches of the bearer. Now that one's situational and matchup dependent. It's not always going to be relevant, but there are some matchups where that's going to be extremely relevant. So that's really cool as well. And then last, we've got Prime Test Subject. This is 35 points, so it's pretty expensive. However, it's a Heretic Astartes infantry model, excluding Damned. Add 1 to the damage characteristic of melee weapons equipped by the bearer, and each time the bearer makes a melee attack, you can re-roll the hit roll. Now this one is absolutely brutal, because you put that on a Chaos Lord, you put him in some Legionaries, and now all of a sudden he's getting re-roll hits and wounds if the target's on an objective, and he's getting +1 damage, which means he can send that Demon Hammer up to damage 4, with dev wounds, with re-rolls to hit and wound, likely with sustained hits from your Dark Pact. This guy puts out an absolutely insane amount of mortal wounds onto your opponent. He can one-shot most things in the game. He's absolutely brutal. So yes, it's expensive, but I think it's points well spent. So literally every one of those enhancements is reasonable. You know, they're either fantastic or they're situationally fantastic. Either way, you wouldn't be wasting your points on any of these. So pick them to your taste. We'll go through some examples of lists in a moment with various enhancements that I've chosen, and I'll explain why. But yeah, they're all fantastic, so that's great. Now let's have a look at some of their stratagems. So they've got some really, really cool stratagems here. You've got Monstrous Visages. You use it in your opponent's shooting phase or fight phase just after they've selected their targets. You get 1 Heretic Astartes infantry unit from your army that was selected as a target of one of those attacks. And until the end of the phase, each time an attack targets your unit, subtract 1 from the hit roll. So a reactive, -1 to hit for a single CP. This is fantastic, especially when you combine it with the fact that it's entirely possible that you're going to get +1 toughness on your units. So now you're tougher and harder to hit. That's just an insane combo that's going to make your units really hard to shift off of objectives, etc. So that's really, really cool. Next, we've got Masters of Watching. So in the fight phase, just after an enemy unit has selected its targets, 1 Heretic Astartes infantry unit from your army that was selected as the target of one of the more of those attacks, and essentially it's fight on death on a 4+. So this one's less amazing because often, you know, you're only going to get half of your unit fighting, and sometimes that means they have to have wiped out the entire unit for you to get critical mass of value to strike back. But it is only 1 CP, and on certain characters in your army, this is actually worth it. So for example, if you have that Chaos Lord with that super hammer that we were talking about earlier, if somebody goes in and charges him, you're probably going to use this strat, because then you've got a 50-50 chance of that Lord just nuking whatever just killed him, right? So certain situations, very, very good, but also there's plenty of situations where this is one that you're not going to bother with, so bear that in mind. But yeah, it's good to have it in your toolkit. Next, we have Specimens for the Spider. It's in the fight phase. 1 Heretic Astartes infantry unit from your army that's yet to be selected to fight. Until the end of the phase, each time a model in your unit makes a melee attack that targets a character unit, you can re-roll the wound roll. And if your unit has, or after your unit has fought, If one enemy character model was destroyed, select an enemy unit within 6 inches of your unit, and that enemy takes a battle shock test. If the enemy warlord was destroyed as a result of those attacks, each enemy unit within 6 inches takes a battle shock test. Now, this one's 2 CP, so it's pretty expensive, but being able to get reroll wounds is absolutely fantastic. Now, this means that your things like Possessed or your Chaos Lords with your Demon Hammers getting reroll wounds when they have those devastating wounds are going to do way more damage. And it means that you don't necessarily have to attach your Chaos Lord to Legionaries in order to get that. And it also means that, things like your Possessed that don't really have access to rerolls anywhere else are going to be doing a lot of damage. It is only when you're targeting character units, which is kind of disappointing. It would have been nice to see it as monsters, characters, and vehicles or something like that. But still, very, very powerful stratagem. And it's one that you're going to want to, in certain situations, you're definitely going to want to save 2 CP so that you can pull that one off. Next, we have Delayed Mutations. This is also 2 CP. In your command phase, select one Heretic Astartes infantry unit from your army. Your unit suffers D3 mortal wounds, but then you get to select one augmentation, and until the start of your next command phase, units in your army have the selected augmentation in addition to the other augmentations they have. So this is really good because there might be some situations where you're like, I'm about to charge something really big and scary. I need to kill it. I've got my Warp Talons. I managed to get +1 attack and say +1 toughness when I rolled up my random traits at the start. Well, now I'm going to put +1 to hit as well. So now they're hitting on 2s with those additional attacks. Really push the damage characteristic up. Or there might be a particularly difficult charge that you're planning to pull off that turn. So you might go, cool, I'm going to spend these 2 CP to get a +2 movement on those Possessed or on those Warp Talons or whatever it is to get you that additional threat range. There's lots of really cool stuff you can do with this. But it is 2 CP and you do have to take mortal wounds. So it's one of those ones where you're not going to be spamming this. You're not going to hit this button every game. But certain situations, it's absolutely fantastic. Next, we've got Diabolical Regeneration. So it's 1 command point. In your command phase, you select 1 Heretic Astartes infantry unit, excluding Damned, and 1 destroyed model, excluding character models, is returned to your unit. And if your unit's battle line, you gain D3 models instead, excluding characters. So this is really good for a few things. One of them is if you want to try to outscore your opponent, like they might have killed your legionaries down to only one model in the Lord, and you can go, cool, I'm actually going to spend a CP in my command phase. I'm going to regenerate D3. Say I bring 2 back. I'm going to place those 2 on that same objective. And now I have OC7 because I've got 3 legionaries and a Lord. And now all of a sudden you're able to flip those objectives. So that's really, really cool. And also, one of the best uses for this is bringing back an Obliterator. 1 CP to bring back an Obliterator if they've killed 1 out of your 2 is really, really crazy. And if you have those Obliterators with the additional toughness and then the -1 to hit from the other stratagem, it's going to be really hard for your opponent to kill both. So there'll be situations where you'll do that. They'll put a bunch of shooting into you. They'll kill 1, and then it ticks over to your command phase. You resurrect the one that they just killed, and then send your 2 Obliterators in to do their shooting and their combat. Really, really brutal. So there's lots of good uses for the Diabolic Regeneration. And then the last one is nice and simple. Auto Stimulants. Start of your charge phase, select a Heretic Astartes infantry unit from your army, and until the end of the turn, they're eligible to declare a charge in a turn in which they advanced. So advance and charge. It's one of the best stratagems for combat armies. It gives you that additional threat range, that additional utility, and also on an army that has the ability to get +2 to their movement is really, really good. It's going to play almost like a World Eater's army in terms of how fast they can be. +2 move with advance and charge. That's what World Eaters are all about. And you can put that on something like Warp Talons, which are really, really fast. So these guys are going to have a similar threat range and a similar scare factor to the World Eaters. So there's literally nothing in here that's bad. Every one of those stratagems is usable. Every one of those enhancements is usable. And even every one of these detachment rules is very usable. Now, a quick note on the detachment rules. There's certain builds that you can do where you design it to specifically take advantage of one or more of these particular abilities. But I recommend putting Fabius Bile in and almost always rolling for it and re-rolling any duplicates because you've got Fabius as your warlord. And that way you're going to get, 2 of these abilities because almost every one of them is useful, right? Then getting two of them is just straight up better than getting any particular one. I don't think there's any particular one in here that is so much better than the rest that you would want to just take it. However, it does depend on the way you build your list and whether or not you've built it with the intent on taking advantage of any of these particular abilities. So let's jump over and have a look at some lists that we can write that are going to have really, really good utility and synergy with these rules and enhancements. All right, so here we have a bunch of lists. So I've got one that's centered around firepower, one that's centered around speed, one that's centered around toughness, and then one that's designed to be balanced and take advantage of a bit of everything, right? So let's just go through them one at a time. So let's start with the one that's centered around firepower. So I haven't put in all of the war gear because I can let you do that to your taste. You all know what's good. Just put the units in there to give you a bit of an idea on what the general vibe of the army is going to be. And also, the app hasn't updated with the enhancements yet, so you'll have to bear with me. I've basically left some points to play with there so that you can put in the enhancements that you want. So this one, we've got 60 points left. We're going to be using Prime Test Subject, and the other one was called Living Carapace. And the idea here is that you're going to put Living Carapace on your Terminator Lord, and the other one on the Sorcerer. Now, so you got Chaos Lord, Fabius Bile, and a Sorcerer. Now, you'll notice the Lord and the Sorcerer are both in Terminator armor. That's because we're building this list around firepower. That Sorcerer is going to be able to give the additional AP, which is going to boost the damage output of all your guns. And then that Lord is going to allow you to use discounted stratagems as well, which is really, really cool. And then Fabius Bile being the Warlord so that you can reroll your various traits if you want, etc. Now, you'll notice a few consistent things throughout all of these lists. One of them is that they're all going to have Fabius. They're all going to have at least one unit of Cultists and one Rhino, I think, and the unit of Chosen for Fabius to go in. I think those are staples of Creations of Bile list. Like, you need Cultists to sticky your home and screen out your backfield. You need a Rhino so that your various units can gain additional durability by being inside a transport, and also additional movement by gaining that disembark distance of 3 inches before they move. And then you're going to want Fabius and those Chosen, because that unit is absolutely insane, and we'll go through that in a moment. But then, so you got your 3 characters. You've got Cultists. You've got your Rhino. Then we've got here 2 units of 5 Terminators, and the idea is you put your 2 characters in there, your Terminator Lord in one, your Sorcerer in the other, and they're able to deep strike down, put a bunch of firepower in, do various buffs, and then also have decent staying power. They're tough, and they also have decent combat. So they're your sort of midfield bullies, your things that are going to be trying to control the middle of the table. Then we've got a big unit of 10 Chosen. Now, this unit with Fabius in it is insane. It puts out a ton of shooting. It's also got +1 strength and toughness from Fabius, and you can get a further +1 strength or toughness from the augmentations. So you can really push this unit up to crazy amounts of damage output or crazy amounts of durability. And then on top of that, Fabius also allows you to blank 1 attack to 0 damage per turn, which means you're essentially getting a whole bunch of extra wounds there. And he's got that little Acolyte, which can be used as a bit of cannon fodder as well. So the Chosen unit's really, really good. And then this list, we've themed around firepower. So you're going to have 3 units of Havocs. Now, you can load these out however you want. You can give them las cannons, you can give them auto cannons, you can give them chain cannons, whatever you want. I personally think you probably want 1 unit of each, because that way you have a very specified tool for any given situation. You know, if somebody throws 20 gaunts out in front of you, you go, cool, I'm going to bring out the chain cannon guys, and they're going to shoot the gaunts. If somebody brings out, you know, a bunch of vehicles in front of you, you go, cool, I'm going to bring out the las cannon guys, and they're going to do their damage. So being able to have a bit of variety in your units is generally pretty good. But, you know, do that to your own taste. Then we've also got 3 units of Obliterators. These guys obviously put in a ton of damage. They've got deep strikes, so you can use them to drop down and get firing angles where you want. And then if you can't get the firing angles, they also have indirect as an ability as well. So this brings a ridiculous amount of firepower. It's going to be very, very good. And then finally, we round out the list with a single unit of Raptors, and the idea with these guys is that they're going to be able to go out and do your actions while the rest of your army just shoots the crap out of things. And obviously, being a shooting-themed list, this one you're going to want that +1 ballistic skill. You can either just select it, or you can roll for it, knowing that you essentially get 4 rolls because you could roll twice and then you could re-roll both of them. So the chances of you getting a 6 on 4 rolls is relatively high. Depends how risky you're feeling. Now it's worth noting that all of the combat buffs do help this out as well. Like for example, the movement is great when you've got things like Terminators and Obliterators that are quite slow. An additional 2 inches worth of movement goes a long way for those. And then also you've got things like the combat buffs. You know, they're really good on Terminators, and Obliterators punch pretty hard, and the Chosen punch pretty hard. So none of the options are bad. So I would probably just roll for it. But again, it's designed around the firepower element. So that's one list, one way that you could run it. Next, we're going to do one that's all about speed. So the idea of this one is basically playing it almost like a World Eaters player, where you're leveraging the fact that your units are faster than your opponents, which means you can stay outside of their effective charge range, but they're in your effective charge range, which puts your opponent in a really tricky position because they have to either fall back so that you can't charge them, but if they do that, they're sacrificing the table to you, or they need to come closer, but they're too far away to charge you, and then they've just given you a really, really easy charge by allowing you to just jump on them. So that's what this list is sort of themed around. So you've got Fabius Bile, standard, Cultist, standard, Rhino, standard, Chosen, standard. So they're the ones we've already discussed those and why they're in the list, and you're going to have them in every list. Next, we're going to have 3 units of 10 Possessed and 3 units of 10 Warp Talons. So you're essentially going to have 6 big combat bricks, and all of them are going to benefit massively from the +2 movement because all of them have the ability to advance and charge. So being able to use your Warp Talents and your Possessed in synergy like that is going to be absolutely brutal. And the Possessed are actually quite tough. So what you can do here, one of the biggest problems with Warp Talons, they're really fast, they hit really hard, and even though they're really squishy and easy to kill, they have that really cool trick where you can basically kill something in there and then disappear back into reserves. So if you play the Warp Talons well, it's going to be really difficult for your opponent to allocate any attacks to them. But the problem with that playstyle is it becomes really hard for you to score your primary objectives. Because if you're charging somebody off an objective and then teleporting away, now nobody's on the objective. Sure, your opponent doesn't score it, but neither do you. And if you do that enough times, eventually it gets to a point where you're like, wow, nobody's scoring any points here. So the Possessed come into play here really, really well, where your opponent puts something out on an objective, you move your Possessed out, you charge it, then you move your Warp Talons out, you charge it, you fight with the Warp Talons, you kill it, and then you disappear with your Warp Talons, and now your Possessed is sitting on that objective. And then in your opponent's next turn, you can rapid ingress your Warp Talons back in somewhere safe, charge with the Possessed, charge with the Warp Talons, and do it again. And basically, you can just keep recycling like that, where your opponent puts all of their time and effort into trying to kill the Possessed, meanwhile your Warp Talons are doing heavy damage. And then if you do find something like somebody goes, haha, I'm going to put something really tough out on an objective that you're going to struggle to kill, you can just go, cool, Possessed hit it, the Possessed fight first, weaken it, and then the Warp Talons fight, killing it, and then the Warp Talons can disappear. So you can use these 2 units in tandem quite well. And the Possessed also, if you're going into any unit that has a character in it, when you put reroll wounds on them, they put out a ridiculous amount of hurt. Now, this list, the only one of those augmentations that it doesn't want is the +1 ballistic skill. Every other augmentation is insane, right? So I recommend with this one, basically you roll them up, and if you roll the +1 ballistic skill, you just re-roll that one. But whatever your other one is, you just accept it. Because plus movement, great. +1 to hit, great. +1 attack, great. You know, +1 attack on the Warp Talons and the Possessed is fantastic. +1 toughness is great. Like, all of these things are really, really good. Now, you'll notice there's a severe lack of shooting in this list, but I don't think that's that big of a problem because, for example, let's say your opponent's got a Rhino with some Khorne Berserkers in it or something like that, and you're like, okay, cool, I want to kill the Khorne Berserkers, but I can't because they're inside a Rhino and I don't have any shooting. Well, that's fine, because all you do is you charge the Possessed and the Warp Talons into the Rhino, you kill the Rhino with the Possessed, and then the guys disembark, and then because your Warp Talons made a charge this turn, they're eligible to pile into and attack those Khorne Berserkers, which means you're going to be able to kill both, and that also allows you to get around things like fights first, because when your opponent's got their Khorne Berserkers out, they're battle shocked, so they're not able to heroically intervene or do anything fancy like that, and also because you're not within engagement range of them, they cannot select that unit to fight. And then when you select your Warp Talons to fight, you can pile into, make attacks, and then consolidate before your opponent gets an opportunity to use their fight first rule. So this unit, it's, you know, on paper you might look at it and think that's going to really struggle with transports, but if you know the tricks, then it's not really that big of a deal. I did a video a while ago with some fight phase masterclass tips and tricks. If you're going to play this list, you're definitely going to want to watch that video because I break down all the tricks like that in great detail, models out on the table with examples to make it nice and clear. So definitely check that out if you're considering running this list. But this is a really cool way to play Creations of Bile. Next, we've got Toughness. Now, one of the most oppressive things in this detachment is that ability to get +1 Toughness on all your infantry models. It's crazy. So, in this list, we've got Fabius Bile as your Warlord. We've got a Master of Possessions here, and he's going to take the Precision enhancement just because we had some floating points. We've got your Cultist Mob, standard, your Rhino, standard, and then we've got the Chosen, standard. We've got 2 units of Havocs. Now, it's worth noting the Havocs are Toughness 5, so if you get that augmentation of +1 Toughness, they go to Toughness 6. You put them in some cover, they're going to be really hard to shift. They're really tough. So you got your Toughness 6 Havocs. Then we've got 3 units of Obliterators. Now, the Obliterators, they go up to Toughness 8, which is a really interesting breakpoint because it means that Strength 4 weapons are now going to be winning you on 6. You know, Strength 7 weapons are going to be winning you on 5s. Strength 8 weapons are now only winning you on 4s, as opposed to 3s previously. Really, really tough. It makes these Obliterators really hard to shift. And then we round it out with 3 big units of Possessed. Once again, that plus Toughness puts these guys to Toughness 7, which is so crazy for an infantry model to be Toughness 7. You know, even things up to Strength 6 are winning you on 5s. Really, really hard to shift. It's also got a little bit of a mix between shooting and melee, so once again, I think this is one where you probably can just get away with randomizing your rolls, because it kind of takes the +1 to hit pretty well in shooting and in melee. It takes the +1 attack in melee quite well. It's, you know, it's a bit of a varied army, but it's mainly focused around that additional toughness. We're bringing in just tough as fuck units. And then last but not least, I want to talk about the balanced list. Now, this is a list that I actually took to an event on the weekend. It was only a 2-round, sort of more of a training day, practice day event. I played with a list very, very similar to this, and it did really, really well. So it's a very strong list. I can definitely attest to that. In this one, we've got 2 Chaos Lords. Now, you'll notice that we've got 60 points here to spend. One of them we're going to use to put Living Carapace on one of these guys, and the other one is going to be used to put the, what's it called, Prime Test Subject. And that's going to make that guy with the damage 4, rerolling hits and wounds, Demon Hammer, really, really powerful. And then we've got Fabius Bile. We've then got a unit of Cultists and a unit of Legionaries. Now, there's only one unit of 5 Legionaries. That's the one that's going to take the Demon Hammer Lord with the Prime Test Subject. And that way he's going to get reroll wounds when he targets an enemy unit on objective. And if he's targeting one that's not on an objective, provided they have a character in the unit, you're going to get your reroll wounds anyway. But yeah, if the Lord goes in there. Then we've got a Chaos Rhino, we've got your Chosen, which take Fabius. And then we've got one of my new favorite units, the Nemesis Claw, which you will have seen my video last week about how powerful the Nemesis Claw are. This is the unit that takes your second Chaos Lord. Now, normally you want to put Chaos Lords in with Legionaries for the reroll wounds, but like we said, Creations of Bile have the capacity to get reroll wounds even without Legionaries. So that Lord is still going to be popping off, he's still going to do massive damage, and the Nemesis Claw has the advantage of being able to prevent your opponent from using any stratagems. So that's absolutely broken. I went into that in detail, but you know, suffice to say, they're not going to be able to interrupt combat. They're not going to be able to fall back and shoot. They're not going to be able to do any of the stuff that they want to do in order to really mess with you. Nemesis Claw is a fantastic utility piece in any Chaos Space Marine army. Then we've got 2 units of Obliterators. They're there, like we said, toughness, shooting. They're kind of a bit of everything. They do okay in combat as well. Then we've got 2 units of 5 Possessed. Now, these guys in this list are designed to be your skirmishers. You know, they're the ones where it's like your opponent put 5 Marines out on an objective, you send 5 Possessed to respond. And I think in a truly balanced list, you want to have some big anvil units, so that if your opponent puts out something big and tough, you can send in your big anvil. Or if they send out something small, you want something small in your army that you can respond with, so that you're not committing that big anvil unit to respond. You essentially don't want to allow them to force your hand and provoke an overreaction from you. You know, if they put scouts on an objective, the last thing you want to be doing is sending out 10 possessed to kill those scouts, because now your possessed are out in the open and they're just going to get nuked in return. You want to basically make sure that everything that you do is a proportionate response to what your opponent's doing, so that your opponent never has the ability to get on top of you. And that's what these units of 5 possessed are really, really good for. Particularly if you're getting the +1 to hit or the +1 attack on them, they all of a sudden do really, really good damage. And if your opponent puts out something small with a character in it, and you go in and you're rerolling those wounds, you're going to rip it apart. And then also, on top of that, a unit of 5 possessed with +1 toughness, if you roll that up, sitting out of line of sight on an objective somewhere, is surprisingly hard to shift. Most indirect is going to really struggle to do it, and if your opponent tries to get into combat with you, they're going to really struggle to kill you, and then you're going to be able to respond. So, really effective units there. And then we've got the 2 big units of Warp Talons. Now, these guys, you know, suffice to say, they put out a ridiculous amount of attacks, particularly in this detachment, and they also get their reroll wounds inbuilt, so you can have that there while spending a stratagem to do it over there, whilst your legionaries get it over there. Means you're going to get reroll wounds across most of your army most of the time, which is just insane. And then these guys are also really good because of that teleporting away after they fight. They're really good at making sure that when you do commit, you're not sacrificing anything. So if they did put, say, 10 cultists that scout moved up onto a central objective, you could very safely just go, cool, I'm actually just going to send out my 10 Warp Talons, they kill the cultists, and then they disappear, and now I've sacrificed nothing, but I've taken away your piece. So there'll be certain situations where you send these guys out, certain situations where you send your possessed out, certain situations where you send your Chaos Lords with their Legionaries or the Nemesis Claw out. It gives you all these different tools that you can optimize for any given situation. You know, maybe it's a situation where you just drop the Obliterators down and you shoot the target, so you don't have to sacrifice anything yourself. You've got a lot of different pieces, which allows for maximal flexibility in the way that you play the detachment. So that is my picks for the best top four lists for the Creations of Bile. So there we have it, guys. That's my summary of the Creations of Bile. I think this detachment is absolutely fantastic, and I can definitely see it rivaling the Renegades Raiders and the Veterans of the Long War. I think Chaos Space Marines have just been granted a third option that wasn't available to them before, and it'll be really exciting to see what people are able to do with this on the tabletop. Those abilities to get +1 toughness, +1 strength, +1 to hit, +1 attack, you know, all of these are really, really powerful abilities, and they effectively will affect every model in your army if you build your army around this. I know there's a lot of really popular Chaos Space Marine choices that I didn't include in this. For example, the Vindicator is very popular, but I decided not to do that because I want to really milk that army rule to make sure that we're getting absolute value out of it across our entire force, which is why we've got more Obliterators than you would typically see. We've got things like Havocs that you don't typically see, because they take these abilities really, really well, and they really enhance the power of those units. They also then synergize with all of the stratagems that you have available to you. It's really, really cool. I think this is one of those armies where, because you have so many fantastic stratagems, you're going to have to very closely manage your command points, because there's going to be certain situations where you're going to want to spend 2 command points for reroll wounds, or you're going to want to spend 2 command points to get an additional augmentation. And you might want to do that in the same turn that you advance and charge. So making sure that you manage your command points so that you always have as many as you can for the tricks that you need is going to be really important. One of my keys on how to do this, which I've discussed in several videos prior, is making sure that you don't overcommit too early. You know, basically take all these units, hide them, put them somewhere safe, and then basically commit the minimal required to achieve your goals. So if they put out something, cool, send your Warp Talons, kill it, and then come back, right? Don't put anything out in the open, and that way basically your opponent then puts out a little bit more, you respond, you go back and forth, and then by the time you get to the point where they're committing their big stuff and you're committing your big stuff, By that time, you're going to have 3, 4, or 5 command points at your disposal, and that's when you're able to go, cool, this is the turn where they've put out, Marnius Calgar and his aggressors and all of that, whatever, or the Blade Guard unit, or whatever it is that your opponent has, your Death Shrouds, whatever it is that they have that's a really tough unit that you're worried about. By the time they've put that into the middle of the board, you're able to go, okay, sick. The chosen unit goes in, they're going to advance and charge because they have that inbuilt. Then I'm going to put an additional attack on them for 2 CP, and I'm going to put reroll wounds on them for another 2 CP, and I'm just going to go absolutely mental and kill that unit in the middle. That's a really, really effective strategy, but it's going to cost you so many CP, you need to make sure that you time it well. So that's the main advice that I'll have if you're going to be playing Creations of Bile, is just make sure you're monitoring your command points. You're planning how many turns is it when you want to go, and then how are you going to make sure that you manage your CP between now and then. Don't waste them on things like a CP reroll or a rerollable charge. Make sure that you're only going for really easy charges, and you're only really giving up what's required at the time, so that you still have all of your resources for that big turn when everything happens. If you're able to pull that off and win that turn, you're going to be able to roll over most armies, because you're going to be able to just go, cool, I don't care what you've put in the middle, Fabius Bile's unit with all of these stratagems in it is going to crack it, and now I'm going in and I'm just going ham, because then when you respond, you're firing into Fabius Bile's unit, which is really tough. The obliterators have come down, all of the bells and whistles are here, and they're all attacking simultaneously. That is how you play Creations of Bile. So absolutely fantastic detachment. I think this is one of the best ones, and I know that's probably very heavily biased because I am a Chaos Space Marine player at heart. I spent almost all of 9th edition playing Creations of Bile. It was one of my favorites, and I'm super excited to see it return. So let me know what you guys think of this detachment in the comment section below. And if you want to show your support for this channel so that I can continue to produce content like this more frequently, because it does get hard when I work 45 hours a week in a warehouse. It does get hard to put aside the time to research, prepare, record, and edit these videos for you guys. So if you want to help me out, head over to blogforthebloodgod.com. And there you can pick up things like this t-shirt, you can pick up neoprene gaming mats, objective markers, we've got really cool bespoke dice, there's tons of really cool ways that you can show your support for the channel by picking up some sweet merchandise, or you can go through the Patreon, join our Discord server, get one-on-one coaching, which is something that we offer over there, and that's also a great way of showing your direct support for the channel. And all of this goes towards increasing the frequency of the content that I'm able to produce, also increasing the quality of the equipment that I use and that sort of stuff. All of the apps and programs that it requires to put all this together aren't free, so for those of you who do support on Patreon, I very much appreciate it, and I'd love to say a sincere thank you. And for those of you considering, I welcome you, and I look forward to seeing you in the Patreon and in the Discord community. With that being said, I'm going to leave it here. Thank you very much for tuning in, and look forward to seeing you in the next one. Cheers, guys.
The Warhammer community suffers from some of the most prohibitively expensive essentials in the world, especially Australian content creators. Every single day, Dean wants to create content, but he can't. Suffering from old, worn-out brushes, expensive model kits, and costly software and equipment, he can't endure much longer. Just look at this dirty paint water. Would you drink this? Would you let your child? Even a small monthly donation can help provide Dean with clean paint water, basic tools for survival, and access to life-saving information and education. So please, follow the links in the description below and find out how you can sponsor a mad cunt like Dean today and end the suffering. Suffering that is cruel, unsustainable, and your fault.